Hey guys, this is Dale Tedder, and welcome to the Practical Christianity Podcast. Thank you, thank you for being patient with me while I have been gone for quite some time, which is a great segue because we're going to be talking about patience over the next handful of episodes, more on the video side as opposed to the audio. The audio will have this as well, but it will be an exclusive feature of the videos that I'll put on my Substack. Speaking of which, you can check out more resources for Christian discipleship and formation at daletedder.substack.com. Got that out of the way. Anyway, I've been out. My daughter just got married, and I've just had a busy summer and reflecting on some things and what I want to be doing with this platform. And I just think this is a great opportunity to share some things about a Christian understanding of how to live faithfully as a Christian. And what really convicted me was just throughout my Bible studies, I will sometimes just throw away a line like, I really am impatient in the car. I've had to ask my kids to forgive me so many times over the years. And, it's almost like a punchline to something. And in reality, I think it says a whole lot more about me than I probably care to admit, how impatient I am when I'm driving. And I usually think of myself as a patient person. But when I'm in the car, I discover how impatient I really am. And then I start seeing it kind of bleed over into other areas of my life. Or maybe it's always been there and I just don't really notice it until it's on my mind. Whatever the reason, I thought I would write a devotional series and Bible study on the pursuit of patience, which again is what this is called. And I thought, well, I'll do a video series on it as well. And if you don't want to take the time to read it online, which I get, maybe you'd rather listen to it while you're driving in the car, which would be a great place to listen to something on patience, or watch it on video, whatever is most convenient for you. But I want you to think about a few scenarios, and I'm sure it's happened to all of us, that if you've ever snapped at your kids over nothing, which I'm sure has never happened to any of you, or sat in traffic and you just kind of felt your blood pressure rising, you felt your blood beginning to boil at something which really was not anywhere close to being in proportion to what it should have been. Or you just had one of those days where you felt like, this is just not a very good day. This day is not what I thought it was going to be. Well, then hopefully this series on patience is for you, because I know it is for me. As I mentioned, patience. In some areas, I'm very patient, I guess. My wife, I think, would tell you that I am. Maybe you shouldn't ask her, but I think she would. But there are other areas where I'm not a very patient person. And so I'm a work in progress. So I'm not speaking as someone who's got it all figured out. I'm kind of traveling this journey with you of pursuing patience. So I want to start today at one of the things that was very convicting for me. I have studied this many times and read books on it. And of course, the Bible is filled with not only commandments and admonitions to pursue patience, but lots of examples of patience and patient people. And certainly, Christ was a very patient person. He had to be to do all the things he did and deal with all the people he had to deal with. He had to be very patient. So we're going to be talking about what I'm going to refer to as sort of a gap. And it's a gap of expectations of what we expect, the way something's going to be and the way things actually occur. There's that gap. And very often we find that our impatience appears in that gap between expectation and reality. And I remember one of my mentors used to talk about so much of frustration in this life comes from unrealistic expectations. And I know that impatience is certainly born from that as well. So back to that, there's this frustration that we sometimes experience, and we don't always experience it, or we don't always name it, I guess is a good way of putting it, as impatience. We we call it 1,000 different things. Like I said earlier, I'm just having a bad day. The morning didn't go as I planned it to go. The project that I'd been working so hard on and trying to get everything moving on just sort of stalled out. The person I was really depending upon just did not come through for me. And by the way, this is not to say expectations are wrong in general, but sometimes they're unrealistic, or sometimes we put all our eggs in one basket of expectations. So when that doesn't come through for us, we get frustrated. Or maybe, you had a conversation and you played it out in your mind before the conversation, and the conversation went nothing like what you planned. I'm sure that's never happened to any of you as well. And then you replay it after over and over again. And you're like, how did I think of this in such a different way than what really happened? But I think in those moments, many of us at least don't ask what actually happened in that moment. Again, we just call it a bad day and we move on to the next day without really a lot of reflection and introspection of what could have gone better, or what is it about me that thought it should have gone that way, and how can I maybe adjust my thinking? And so that's what some of the things we're going to be talking about. But very often, as I've been mentioning, the culprit in all of this is not the traffic. If you there's going to be traffic. It's not the coworker. It's not whatever circumstance, which is really a general way of putting it, but covers a lot of area. But it's the expectation that we had going into it. Something that we assumed would happen, but didn't, because reality clocked in and it declined to honor our expectation. I heard a comedian one time use that phrase about reality clocking in, and I just thought that is the greatest way to put that, because reality just gives us a reality check and says, nope, that's not what's going to happen. And then you realize, I need to adjust my expectations here because they were way, too high. And again, not that we shouldn't have expectations, even high expectations in certain areas, but when we put all our eggs in that basket, that's when we start finding impatience, among other things, starts creeping in. So that's what I want us to think about today. I think that impatience is always born in that gap that I was just talking about between expectations on the one hand and then reality on the other. And, I think it's important for us to close that gap between what is my expectation and then what is reality. Am I in the ballpark of reality, or do I have such unrealistic expectations about how this day should go? That I shouldn't have any traffic when I go to work in the morning, that I can leave no matter what time I leave, I'll get there in plenty of time. Well, that's not a very realistic expectation. Or my child is going to do exactly what I told them to do the first time I told them to do it. And the fact that they might not understand, or might not have been listening, or might just decide to do their own thing, well, that couldn't be, because I told them to do this. I mean, there's a lot of unrealistic expectations. And so that gap between our expectations and reality, that is where impatience gains a lot of momentum, and that's where it's born. So we need to really look honestly, I think, at our expectations that we carry into our days. We need to kind of say out loud, yep, this is what it is. Because if we just keep treating the symptoms of just a bad day because I didn't have that good conversation, or the traffic was bad, or whatever, it's like not dealing with the root of the problem. And that's what you find in the Bible so often. Scripture encourages us to look at the root of the issue, of both the root of our sin, but also the root of our joy and our faithfulness and righteousness and all of that. We want to go deeper than just surface level analysis. We want to go deep and see what the issue is. Proverbs 13 verse 12 puts it this way, that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And I think that's really a very honest verse of Scripture. When what we hope for doesn't show up on the schedule that we had, the schedule that we worked hard to put together, then that can actually, well, Proverbs says, kind of make us sick in our heart. We're downcast, we're upset, we're frustrated. It brings a lot of feelings and emotions, and hopefully not behavior and actions that aren't godly and aren't healthy. But we call it other names when we have this sickness of heart. We call it stress. We call it a short fuse. We call it a bad mood. Some of us even blame our lineage of, well, my family's always been like this. But the writer of Proverbs, kind of named it for what it really is. But here is what the Scripture is not saying. It's not saying that hope is the problem. Hope is not a bad thing. I'm tempted to quote Shawshank Redemption right now. It's the best of things. It's a good thing. Hope is a good thing. But we need to understand that it's our expectations that we need to be concerned about. Expectations by themselves aren't foolish, because the same hope leads to life at the end of that proverb when that longing is fulfilled. So we're made to hope, but are we hoping in the right things? Hope is not the issue by itself. The real question is whether our expectations are tethered to that which is worthy of our hope. Or another way of putting it is, are our expectations, or is our hope connected to reality? Do we have a realistic view of what we're hoping in? And are we submitting ourselves to the one who actually governs the world? So when we put our hope in God, which is, that's all through the Psalms and through the Scriptures of, why so downcast, O my soul, put your hope in God? Because very often we don't do that, do we? Our expectations are in people, in circumstances, in all the things we had in our mind about the way things should have gone. And when they don't, well, then very often we find that we get frustrated and impatient, and then impatience turns to anger, and anger turns to bitterness, and it becomes a big mess. So we want to catch it early. So here are just some things to talk about. We're going to be talking about this idea of expectations in the next couple of episodes as well. But I just want to give you some food for thought, because I don't want to keep you all day talking about this. Proverbs 13, verse 12 was probably written with big, long-term hopes in mind. But I want you to understand that it includes those ordinary days as well. So ask yourself this question: where in your own life do you feel that particular ache? That hope or that expectation that you have had that just has not yet arrived. That's the first thing. Where do you feel that ache over a hope or expectation that hasn't yet arrived? And then number two, think back over this past week. You don't have to go back years or months, but just this past week. Where specifically did reality clock in? Where did reality fall short of what you expected, whether that was your time, whether that was plans that you had made, whether that was particular people in your life that let you down because they didn't do exactly what you expected them to do. And then what was your gut reaction in that moment? When things didn't go the way you planned, how did you react in your gut? Even if you didn't show it outwardly, how did you feel about that? And what does that reaction actually reveal about what you were quietly assuming was going on and what should have happened the way you thought it should have happened? And then the third question is that unmet expectations usually carry this hidden belief that goes right underneath them, that we deserved something different or something other than what we got. And we're going to be talking more about that in the next couple of episodes. So where do you think your own persistent expectations come from? Would you say they come from your upbringing, your personality, your past experiences? or maybe even the culture around you telling you that you deserve so much better, and so you should expect this from other people. Where does all that come from? It's a good idea to ask yourself, where am I getting this expectation? Why do I have this particular expectation? Is this realistic or not? Those are some things we should be asking. That's just some food for thought. And then sort of what I call walking points, or you can call it a next step or an action step. But before the next 7 days, so we'll call it a week's time, before the week's out, take 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, and just jot down in a journal or a notebook or whatever you may have, put it on your phone, but write down the expectations that you carry most regularly into your days. Now, these might be realistic expectations, things you ought to expect. And again, that's reasonable. There are reasonable expectations, but even with those reasonable expectations, when we put all our eggs in any kind of expectation, there are certainly unreasonable, unrealistic expectations that we shouldn't put a lot of stock in. But even with those reasonable expectations, hopefully you've lived long enough to know that even in those, things are not going to go the way you expected. How do you respond in those moments? Write down what those reasonable or unreasonable, whatever expectations you have, write those things down. So whether you're talking about your schedule, your time, the pace of your life, the people in your life, outcomes that you expect, and just write down any and everything. Don't judge them, and don't say, well, I shouldn't put this. And I just write down everything. You're the only one who's going to see it. But just write them down, and start really reflecting and praying over those things, because you can't hand God something that you've not really been willing to honestly deal with yourself. So, because there's a lot of things that we had hoped for in life, especially early in life, and things didn't go our way, and now we're doing something completely different than what we thought. And sometimes we carry that stuff around with us for a very long time. Or maybe you think you got a raw deal in a particular relationship or a particular job or whatever it may be. And, that can be hard. So before we want to hand things over to God, we want to make sure we properly understand what it is we're handing over to God so we can give it to Him. And we'll be talking more about that, not only throughout the series, but also, the next couple episodes, which will be dealing with expectation. So, excuse me, that's it for today. So we started with that gap, that space between what we expect and then what actually happens. And I want to encourage you just to continue thinking about that gap. And then the next time that we're together, we're going to talk about a man. You probably, if you are a Christian and you've studied the New Testament, you may know who this man is, but he learned a lot about expectations and patience and all of that while he was in a prison cell. Here's a hint. No hint. You can figure out who it is. But if this person could learn how to be content in all things, there's a hint, in that circumstance, well, then there is indeed hope for the rest of us. So thank you again for joining me today. Please check out my Substack. There's a lot of great resources there for Christian formation and discipleship. And I think you can get a lot of mileage and a lot of benefit from checking those things out. A lot of links also to other folks who have some great things to say. So thank you so much. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.